it's, well, where are you getting this? Well, we're reading it here, we're reading it there. So once they realize this is really what everybody in the entire world church is reading, that is fundamentally what became the New Testament. Then there were a couple books that were disputed. Among them was Revelation. Revelation wasn't definitively in the canon of the Eastern Church until the 500s.
Wow.
3rd John, 2nd John, 2nd Peter, these were that touch disputed, meaning some churches used them in their liturgy and some didn't. Some didn't have them, is actually what was going on. They never got copies of them. But people knew they were authentic, so they eventually made it into the scriptures. Even if church in blah, blah, blah didn't have that copy, they're like, well, this church over here has it. It makes sense they would have it because he wrote it to them, and that's kind of how the New Testament took shape. The church really, the Eastern Church especially, there's no one council that defines the Bible books. It was determined by use. Yeah. Which is why, by the way, Revelation wasn't included in the canon until very late, because the Orthodox Church still to this day doesn't read the Revelation in the Divine Liturgy. Yeah.
And then I'm reading right now, I'm studying like the origins of the Bible by Tommy McDonald.
Okay.
And in his, he talks a lot about the Orthodox Church in the beginnings, but he gives like a list of like all the church fathers and the books that they had, like in their New Testament. And one of them that was pretty common that I noticed in the list was the Shepherd of Hermas. And it was said that that was the third most found book besides Matthew and John. So those on there, like the church fathers list, I guess, I don't want to say like main church fathers, but during that time to decide, that book popped up a lot.
Yeah, it was being read. It very nearly did end up in the canon. And the only reason it was excluded from the canon, this is a really cool one, Shepherd of Hermas, is a really cool one because it would have been included in the canon, but the early church knew it wasn't written by an apostle, and that's the reason it's not included.
Like Clement and Ignatius.
Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't that it wasn't being read. It was being read. Everyone read it. It was even authoritative. There are quotes from it as a statement of like, this is what we believe. The shepherd says it. Go, whoa, that's significant. But it's not in the Bible. Right? And it's not in the Bible because it wasn't being read in the Divine Liturgy in the churches. And you could apply that to St. Ignatius and to St. Polycarp, all being read in the early church, authoritative. I mean, St. Ignatius is authoritative across the board. St. Polycarp too, but his stuff isn't as widely read today as St. Ignatius's. But the same deal. So it's good to know that all throughout Christian history, there's always been really good books to read that weren't in the Bible. You know. All right, let's begin with prayer. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Glory to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. Ah, yes.
Last time right there?
What's that?
Is that last time Christ is risen from the dead?
It will be for us, yeah.
Do we start kneeling after today or after
Pentecost. Yeah.
Do we start fasting after today or after Pentecost?
We'll start fasting. Our first fast day will be Friday.
Friday.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep. It's time to get back to it. Yeah, I have over-enjoyed not having to fast during the week. All right, so we're in chapter 17 of the book of Revelation, and let me give a little bit of a preliminary discussion here because we're gonna hit up against this a lot. So in our study of the book of Revelation, we've been talking about different meanings, okay, and what is it predicting? What is this future that it sees, right? And there's really three levels of time being discussed. The first level of time is what we would call the present, and that's what they're going through. St. John is living at the time of the Emperor Diocletian, all right? Right after Nero has died, okay? And he is living at the time, there's another king in the middle, and then there's Diocletian. Diocletian was seen as the second coming of Nero, and so we know that he's interpreting these events, the rise of Diocletian and what's coming, this persecution that's getting ready to start, is what he's foreseeing. And he's warning the people, you people in these 7 churches, you need to be aware a major persecution is getting ready to break out, and you need to be ready to do the things you're supposed to do. And basically, we've interpreted throughout this class, that's been our main interpretation, hasn't it? We've mostly said Revelation's about what's our past, right? Then the second meaning that we've picked up, I hope I haven't left this out, is it also does cover our future. That is to say, there really will be a last day. And a lot of the things that happen in Revelation, they're going to happen in that last time. They're going to take a different form, but they're going to be similar to what the early church was going through. It will be similar, but it will be the last one. Be the last time it happens. Okay? But many times throughout history, people would look at their time as the time of Revelation. Oh, this is when the Antichrist, and this is the the beast, and this is the this, and this is the that. Well, the thing is that they weren't wrong if you understand Revelation the way it was meant to be read, which is that we always have every era, well, not every era, but very nearly every era has a period of time that's the end. Like there was the end of Israel, which is mostly what's going on in the book of Revelation right now. But then there was the end of Rome, and many people thought the end of Rome was the end of time, that was going to be the end, and it was kind of, but we're still here, right? It had a lot of similarities to Revelation, but it wasn't the last one, and on and on and on. When Russia was falling, you might be familiar, when Tsarist Russia was falling, there were many who believed that was inaugurating the very final days. And they weren't exactly wrong. It did end. It really does mark the end of monarchy largely in the world, and it also does mark the end of an entire way of being a Christian, because it's never come back since then, right? And so it really did mark an end, but it's our past. Now, we lived past it. But one day, it's going to happen, and it's going to be the last one that happens. That's going to be the difference. And then the third meaning that I also hope that we've hinted at, and I've already kind of hinted at it, is our life is in the book of Revelation. That we all each live in the church at a time in which our life parallels the lives of those who are living and receiving the book of Revelation. In other words, we can read it like a book written to us, right? I probably should have said the past, the future, and our life, our present, right? So yes, it was true of ancient Israel. So I should say it was their present, but it's our past. It's also about the future. There is a day that will be the last one, but it's also about our present, because we're living in a time, and there's a beast in our time, and there's an Antichrist of our time, and does this make sense? And we're really going to get a big face full of this today. So that's why I thought maybe if we start here, we'll kind of recognize it. Because we're going to see today, it's kind of like, gosh, that applies across the board. So here's chapter 17. We'll read the whole thing because, as we've said throughout Revelation, context is key. We need to read as much of the context so we don't take things out of context. When Revelation is misunderstood, it's usually misunderstood because we're not interpreting it in context. So here we go. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations, the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. But the angel said to me, "Why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. All right. Getting heavy here. Okay, so we begin. Let's just start decoding it real quick. But it is a pretty straight reading. The harlot appears to be unfaithful Israel. The Jewish people who are ruling in the land of Israel are riding the beast. Now, he does not give us clarity on the woman. It never says the woman is, just says that she's committed harlotry with all the nations. That's all it says. So that doesn't necessarily help us right away, but the other stuff does. It talks about she sits on the beast, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. And then it specifically says the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Rome is known, still today, it is referred to as the city set on 7 hills. So he's not laying it in between the lines too much there. The beast is Rome. Okay? And then he starts to explain, but it also has 7 kings. It says this one is the 8th, but it's of the 7 and is going to perdition. There had been a case, and I don't think I wrote it down. Let me know if we need to go over it. But the kings, if you know Julius Caesar, right? He was the first. He was not the original dictator of Rome, right? He was originally the Senate. He was supposed to rule with the Senate. He is the first made into that role. So the first one who has that role truly and completely is Augustus Caesar. Okay? So if you count your Caesars from Augustus to Nero, you get to the, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. But then it talks about that 1 died and came back. They kept this thing that he was and is and wasn't and all this. And that's because when Nero died, there was a period of time where several Caesars ruled in the course of a single year. So nobody knew who the true Caesar was. And then eventually, I think it's after Vespasian, comes Domitian, which is our guy who we talked about, is seen as the second coming of Nero. Okay? So that's why he's the 8th, but he's of the 7. It's this idea that it was and then was not, like it was unstable, and then it came back into power. So Nero being the last super powerful one, now the new powerful one's come, and he's worse than Nero. So it's seen as like a second coming of Nero type of thing. There was a prophecy said of Nero that he was going to be killed and that he would rise again. Well, nobody really thought he would rise again, but spiritually perhaps, in a way of speaking, and that's the way that's the way Revelation takes it. So the dragon with the 7 heads and the 10 horns is the Roman state. Israel is said that she committed fornication by going after other gods and rulers. This is a throwback to Hosea 3. We've cited Hosea a few times, but if you know your book of Hosea, this prophet comes up. God calls this prophet, And he tells the prophet, go and marry a prostitute. And it's explained to the prophet that you're marrying this prostitute because just like God married Israel, who's now prostituting herself, so you're going to go and you're going to marry a prostitute to show these people what living with them is like. Okay? So he marries this prostitute, and she keeps having children. And he keeps giving them horrible names. Yeah. But he's trying to point out, through this prophetic life, he's showing them that you all have committed adultery with the other gods of the world, and you are producing illegitimate children. You are producing sin. So that's what the book of Hosea is all about. And it's a constant call for this prostitute to stop prostituting herself and be a faithful wife. And this is the book of Hosea. So this reference to she has committed fornication by going after other gods and rulers, that's Israel. Israel would have known that right away because Hosea had said that about them many centuries before. You'll also notice the way she's robed, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. She looks like the temple. She's dressed like the temple or the tabernacle. So it's kind of intentional also, right? She looks like their holy place. But now she's drunk. Instead of mastering this beast, we sort of see this lady just drunk, partying it up with this cup of wine. It calls the cup of her fornication. It's the idea that she's just licentious. She's just living however she wants to live. And she's riding the beast to glory. You know, she just feels good about life because everything's going her way. And a big giveaway that this has to be Israel is this idea that written on the forehead is this sign. So the high priest, when he would enter into the Holy of Holies, this is in Exodus 28:36. Oh, let's go back there. Exodus is the second book of the Bible. You don't need to take my word for it. Exodus 28:36. Sometimes we've gone to the same books over and over again, and it seems like we just keep reading the same passages, but this one's new to us. Did I get this citation right? Let me make sure. Oh man, I wrote it down wrong. Hold on, let me see if I can figure it out. I wrote it down wrong. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, it's 32, it looks like.
32, thanks.
He has the turban and it shall be on Aaron's forehead and all that.
There, yeah.
32, 33.
Yeah. Yeah, where's the line here? Oh, there it is. Yeah, 31. So it's 28:31. I need to fix that in my notes, but I'll deal with that later. Okay, so if you go back to verse 30, its sound will be heard when Aaron is serving as a priest, entering and leaving the holy place before the Lord, that he not die. You shall also make a plate of pure gold, and as the inscription of a seal engrave on it, holiness to the Lord. You shall put it on a blue cord, and it shall be on the turban. It shall be on the front of the turban. So this idea is he's got a little sign here that he ties off on his liturgical hat. We might think of like a bishop's mitre, or occasionally I wear the mushroom-shaped hat. And he has a sign on it that says, holiness to the Lord, or holy to the Lord. All right? But now we have this woman who's also dressed like a priest, sitting on this big giant beast, and written on her forehead is not holiness to the Lord, but mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So kind of the opposite. Yeah. Yeah. But there's definite overtones, this idea of a label across her forehead. And there's been a lot of that forehead stuff, right? The chrism was put on the forehead, the mark of the beast was put on the forehead, and now this sign, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth, is written on the forehead. I saw the woman drunk. What's she drunk with? The blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs. Another pretty good sign that we're dealing with the Israelites in the book of Acts. Because we keep seeing throughout the book of Acts that the big problem that the Christians were having was Christianity was not a new religion. Christianity was Judaism fulfilled, right? So Jewish people did not feel that they needed to become a Christian. They, by virtue of being a Jewish person, I'm a Christian. I believed in the Messiah. Now the Messiah has come, right? That might include some changes to the way I live and what I do, but fundamentally, this is a Jewish faith. Well, they're going to the synagogues. This is where St. Paul goes around and preaches. He doesn't go knocking on doors like modern day Jehovah's Witnesses or something. He goes to the place where he should find believers in the Messiah, and he preaches the Messiah. And as we know, it doesn't always go very well. Some towns like it, but most towns do not. And so he finds himself being persecuted from town to town for doing this. So Israel, most towns, does not have the ability to kill people legally, but they would use the Roman government, like they did with Jesus. Turn to the Roman government, accuse the people of blasphemy or whatever other crime they wanted, and then they would get Rome to put them to death. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this idea that she's drunk with the blood of the martyrs and the saints is because it's on her hands.
She's riding on the beast.
And she's riding on the beast. And we would say, right, if somebody's riding a horse, they're controlling the horse. So she's like feeding the beast and making the beast happy, and she's having a good old time as she rides the beast. Yeah.
Is that in the judgment icon?
Well, the judge
like riding the beast with the crown and stuff. Is that
sometimes, but the judgment icon is very varied. I don't think I've ever seen two exactly the same.
'Cause there's some that there are people that are on top of they're monsters, but they're holding out their hand, which I think means something different. But she's full on just like.
Yeah, she's just riding them
Yeah.
like she's happy. But we're gonna find out this doesn't work out real well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, so here we go. So in the next section here, but the angel said to me, "Why did you marvel? Let me tell you the mystery." So we're going to go through the various symbols here. I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, the beast that you saw and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, those whose names are not written in the book of life. So what he's saying is that if you're written in the book of life, which we already saw that, the book of life was common for a king at that time, you might remember this, we covered this, for a king or a ruler at this time to have their friends in a book, have a list of names in a book. These were their friends in the empire and the people that they could trust. Right? These were their closest confidants. So the book of life with God is like his close friends, us. Okay? If your name's written in the book of life, then you are close to God, and you're not going to believe all this garbage that the beast and the woman are saying. Right? Which also tells us if we do believe what the beast and the woman are doing and saying, then we are not behaving like people who are his allies, his close friends. Right? And that makes sense. If a king wrote to you and said, hey, there's a person going around falsely claiming to be, the emperor of Rome, please do not engage these people, then you wouldn't if they showed up because you're buddies with the real emperor of Rome. Same way with Jesus. Jesus is sending us letters. He's given us the scriptures, and he says, this is the way my kingdom runs. This is the way I want you to act. If anyone comes along and offers you another way of being and living, you ignore them. They're not in charge, even if they claim to be. Right? Those in the book of life are those who receive it, and they're like, that's my friend. I'm going to do what he says because I know he always tells me the truth. Right? So the people who are written in the book of life won't believe this, but the people who aren't written in the book of life will marvel. They're going to say, wow, this woman and the beast, they've got it going on, right? So it goes on. Here's the mind which has wisdom. 7 heads are the 7 mountains. We already talked about that. 7 kings. We talked about that. The 10 horns of which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. This refers to kind of a last-minute alliance that is made. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. So he's saying here there's going to be all kinds of political upheaval with regards to what you see around you. But don't worry. They'll make war against me and against my church, but they're not going to be able to overcome because I rule over all kings. Right? He's been given authority over all things. So we have nothing to worry about. The waters which you saw, what do we always say the waters symbolize? The nations. And bingo, that's what it says. The waters that you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot. Okay, so now what we see is what actually happens. So we're going along. We can see this image. This woman's riding on this beast. It's got 7 heads, 10 horns. And she's riding it like a horse. She's drunk. She's having a good old time. Even to this point, she's sitting on the waters. So it's like she gets to rule over the nations by virtue of having this relationship with the beast. But eventually, when the beast gets tired of her, it turns on her. You can imagine one of these dragon heads reaches back and just bites her and eats her. It says actually specifically, more strangely, that it eats her flesh and burns her with fire. That is a direct speaking of the fall of Israel, fall of Jerusalem in the year 70. The eat the flesh is something that Saint Joseph, or not, sorry, he's not a saint, he was a Jewish man. Josephus, the historian, wrote about that time that when Rome went to war against Israel. Remember we talked about Megiddo last week, and so we talked about how Israel, still to this day, it's the same area of the world, is situated, right? The Mediterranean is over here. We have the Sea of Galilee here, the River Jordan, and the Dead Sea here. Jerusalem sits about here, and there's this funnel that happens because it's mountains that opens up into the valley of Jezreel, and this was called Armageddon, Megiddo, which is in the news right now. There was a special just made. They found an ancient church in Megiddo, the oldest known Christian church in the world. They uncovered it, and they found inscriptions and stuff on the old tile floor that they had built. So there's a special going on. We just started it the other day. Anyway, so Armageddon, which just means Har means Mount Megiddo, okay, is here, and you've got to get up this little valley. Well, Rome isn't going to fall for the old 300 trick from the Greeks, right? They're not going to get into a funnel and get fired at for miles and miles and miles. We were just watching that special the other day, Belle. Remember, in the Jezreel Valley, Bella said, I want to go to someplace like that because it is just flat and open, beautiful fields, flowers and crops and everything. But if you think about it from a military place, to be able to stand on a mountain overlooking a massive flatland, they're just pummeling you with catapults and arrows for miles while you're trying to get it. Rome's not going to do that. So what do you think Rome did? Rome encircles the city, starves them out, poisons the water, throws dead bodies in the water, which is eventually going to get into the wells and everything else, and wait. And that's what they did. So they come, and they did this once, and they tried to take it over, but then the emperor died, so the general had to go back and fix a problem, and he leaves. That's what Jesus foretold. He says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, do not go back up and get your stuff, get out. Well, that's because it was surrounded by armies, and then they left. You had a chance to get out. Then they came back. When they came back the next time, there was nobody getting out. All right? They were killing anybody that was coming out. So they surround surround Jerusalem, and in this case, what ends up happening is the Jewish people begin eating their own people. And this is something Josephus remarks, because this is an absolute abomination to the ancient Jewish religion. You would never eat human beings. But they got to that point. And so this thing about eating flesh and burning her with fire, they starved her out until she was eating her own people. And then when absolute chaos had erupted, Rome went in and just wiped the place clean, left nothing of the temple. As Jesus said, not one stone would be left on another, and wasn't. Of course, we know the eastern wall was left, but that is not even the temple wall. That was a wall outside the temple. So the Wailing Wall, as they say.
That exact scenario was mentioned in the Torah, wasn't it? Like, if Israel were to break its covenant?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Hey, folks.
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah. Oh, St. Michael Orthodox Church.
Okay.
Hey there. So, all right. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, so that's a pretty specific prophecy of the fall of Jerusalem. So it turns out that while you think you're riding the beast is nothing for the beast to turn around and eat you. Right? And maybe that's a nice point to kind of stop at, because again, we can look at this and we can say, well, it was really about the fall of Jerusalem in the year 70. Well, it's also about our own lives, because this is what we're doing anytime we think that we have some sin in our life that we can just live with it. Right? That like, well, I've got this sin in my life, but it's okay. Right? Maybe it benefits me sometimes. Maybe I take a little advantage of it at work and it gives me power. Or maybe I lie a little bit and it gives me kind of a leg up on so-and-so. Well, the truth is that once we decide we're going to ride the beast to our benefit, what we don't realize is that the beast is in this for itself. It's going to let us ride as long as we're good for it and then turn on us and kill us. So it's a phrase that I don't say too much in the pulpit, but I say a lot in person. If you've heard it, forgive me. Sin only wants us dead. Sin only wants us dead. It doesn't want anything else. It doesn't benefit us. The minute it gets what it wants, that's when it's doing what makes it happy. This beast has been letting this woman ride it because it benefited it. Right? Now, just turns on her. And it doesn't even act like she has a fight to put up. Of course, I don't think so, because it's like this almighty beast. She's just riding this awesome, having a great old time, and then snap. Boom, gone. Well, this is the thing that we need to keep in mind when or if in our life we have a sin going on in our life that we're not doing anything about. Does that mean that we can always make sin stop right away? No. Some sins are very hard to uproot out of our hearts, addictions and so on. But it's a really good thing to remember that we need to be working on those things. If we're not making a little bit of progress in the right direction, you can almost rest assured we are making progress in the wrong direction. Sin never just says a little bit's enough. Kind of like drugs, right? Is the idea. Drugs or alcohol. If it starts out, oh, it's fine if I have only this much. But we know addiction doesn't like to stop it just a little bit. And that's the same thing sin likes to do to us. All right, so this is what's going on in ancient Israel. This is what can go on in our own life. But if we're the ones written in the book of life, we are those who are friends of God. We're his close confidants, people he can trust. And he tells us how to manage ourselves. We're going to see this in just a minute. And the woman who you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, okay, so is this woman Rome or Israel? I think it's kind of both, but it's fairly clear that she resembles and takes on the form of the people of Israel, especially the fact that it's a woman and not a man, because we would expect Rome, since it was ruled over by men, that its symbol might be a male. But in the case of Israel, she was always personified in the Old Testament as a woman, because she's supposed to be the bride of God, and here a harlot reminding us of Hosea. So is it Israel, is it Rome? It's probably a little bit of both. But fairly clearly here we see Israel playing into it. She's sitting on the seven hills. All right, any questions? I mean, we went through that chapter pretty quick, which is unusual for us, but I think we're getting comfortable with these symbols. So before we go on to 18 is going to go quick too, but we're going to have to really dig in our own hearts for that. We good?
Father, are you familiar with like the Ross Reed's revelation, like preterism and partial preterism?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? So
Mhm.
we'd have the sake that it was fulfilled in reality in the past, but it's also prophecy of the future at the same time.
Correct.
I see.
Correct. All throughout the Old Testament, there seems to be this idea of double fulfillment of prophecies. So the image that I was given and really helps me to understand is if you were on a hike through mountains, okay? I don't know what mountains, there aren't many mountains near us, But I've been to the Smokies a few times, and I lived in the Poconos, and it's similar. If you're hiking and you're right here, you're a little person way over here, this mountain may be all you can see. The little mountain right in front of you, well, you don't know it's little. It actually looks really, really big if you're right in front of it. It looks impossible to get up if you're right in front of it. But you go ahead and you take your hike and you get to the top, and it turns out behind it is a far larger mountain, right? This is the way the Old Testament worked. So, for instance, a virgin shall conceive and give birth. It is very clear in context that Isaiah means this virgin standing right here next to me is going to get pregnant, right? And you, the king, will die before her baby's born. In other words, you have very little time left. That's what that means. But a virgin shall conceive and give birth is used in the New Testament as actually a prophecy of the Christ.
Right.
Both are true. Right? Isaiah's prophecy doesn't make sense if it isn't for his time. But why is it true in his time? Because it's ultimately true about Christ. And this just, for those of you who want to go deeper with your reading of the Bible, this is key for understanding our own life or anything in the Bible. The Bible's always about Christ. Our life is always about Christ. This world is actually revealing to us Christ. That's what life is all about, this thing. Okay? So we see our life and we might think, well, I've got to get up this morning, I've got to go to work so I don't lose my job. And we might think of our life as having the meaning of the little hill. Right? It's like the things I can see right in front of me. But actually, life is really all about Christ. In the same way with the Scriptures are all about Christ ultimately. Which really means, so this is kind of fun, which really means that the way we ought to read Scripture and our life is this first. In other words, the reason this hill is here is because this hill is here, not the other way around. We have a tendency to say, well, I have my life and that leads me to Christ. But what's actually would be deeper to say and more appropriate is I have Christ. He's the primary. This isn't foreshadowing of this mountain. This mountain's the real deal. This is the shadow. Our life is more the shadow. Christ is the light. Does that make sense? So it's backwards from the way we usually think. So again, with Revelation, we want to look at it that way. We want to look at it as, why is this prophecy about the end of time really true for me now and really true for them then?
Right.
Because Christ is everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, Joel's prophecy is about pouring out of the Spirit.
Another
for
example.
then, but then Peter uses it for right now and later on.
Exactly. Because you could honestly say that when will we receive the Holy Spirit totally? In the kingdom, in the final day. But he can apply it to his day because that's the apocalyptic day of the Lord. The Lord has been raised. He's now seated at the right hand of the Father and has now sent his own Spirit. That has to be the end of time. It is the end of time. Because Christ is the end of time. If we see Christ, we see everything. Right? And then everything else falls into place. So to answer your question, there is a preterist reading of this. There is a version where we say, yes, this is the year 70 AD. But AD 70 is played out again and again and again and again, all the way to and culminating in the end of time at the revelation of the King. If Jesus arrived today, and we've been reading the book of Revelation for a few months now, wouldn't you say that everything has been fulfilled in this book necessary for him to come back today? It has. We've been reading it and talking about how our own life, this is telling us how to live in the church, in the world. In the church while the ruler of this world is still going about doing his worst. That's been true for 2,000 years. So Jesus comes back today, none of us are going to be able to say, well, Revelation never happened. It did. Yes, it did. On the other hand, if he waits another 1,000 years, maybe we'll even see more than we think we see now. Who knows? But it's because Christ is the end of time. Right? He is the one that is the end. So good question. The preterists, for those of you who aren't familiar, preterists are a Protestant belief group that everything about the end times in the New Testament's already been fulfilled. There's nothing in the New Testament about the future. But we're not there. We don't believe that. We do believe that there's a lot in the New Testament about the end of time. But they're actually partly right. That's why they can have it.
Partial preterism. So.
Yeah, so to speak. But I think, I mean, because I've been part of those groups in the past, I don't think they like us very much. Because we end up saying everything can be applied to the future. Or that everything's most appropriately applied to the future. But we do need to understand our past so we understand where we fit into the story. We also would be considered historicists in a Protestant world because we believe that this entire book of Revelation encapsulates the entire age of the church. So we end up taking all of their interpretations plus some, but we don't choose one, as it seems. Yeah. Anyways, for those of us who are into that kind of thing. All right. Let's go on to chapter 18. I won't read this whole passage because it's actually self-divided. The context is the context. We'll see what I mean here. So chapter 18. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. Okay, so just Babylon. So Babylon is this great beast, this woman who's sitting on the beast, and it has fallen. There's like a country or like a nation. It has fallen. It's become the dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, a cage for every unclean and hated bird. Unclean birds, just for what it's worth, the idea of this, think about like the owl in a ruined house, right? It's talked about in some of the Psalms. It's this idea of those birds that take up nests in like houses that we go haunted house. You know what I'm talking about? Like the scary kind of birds that like to live in those kinds of dark places. So she's like a desolation. She's like a haunted house, totally ruined. She's just become full of demons. And what's interesting too is it's a cage. So it turns out. So what does that mean? It says, have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. To become bound to this woman, to become bound to Babylon, is to get so into the luxuries that she provides that it becomes a prison for us. That's what it says there. So we think, oh, I'm going to go hang out with the woman and the beast, and I'm going to get rich, and life is going to be good, and I'm going to have luxury and all of this. Well, actually, what's happening is we're being put into a prison. We're being put into a cage. It becomes a place. It's like a gathering place for demons and everything unclean. Okay, the wrath of her fornication, that the kings committed fornication, the merchants have traded with her and they've become rich. So Rome tempted God's people with luxury and led to abominations being done. All right, so does that kind of help us to understand? This is actually, thus far, the scariest one to me, because these next verses are going to sound an awful lot like our country. Because the temptation of Rome that he sees isn't, now, I mean, this is a problem, but it isn't that we're being tortured to the point that we're putting incense on the altar to the emperor. We're past that now. This is the luxury so good we're not willing to live the Christian life. That it's so good living in Babylon that why would we ever leave? And that's Egypt too. Do you remember that in Egypt? The slaves constantly are saying, well, we had it better in Egypt. At least we had food. This is always the temptation for Christians, because it's like, well, if I turn back, it was easier before when I didn't have to fast on Wednesday and Friday. It was easier back when I didn't have to, whatever, name it. Right? I want to be friends with Babylon. That's what imprisoned them. And that is a very scary thing in our time. Because our country, our nation has very, very nearly gotten to become that. You can have anything you want as long as you pet the beast, as long as you let it know, you and I, beast, we have no problem here. Right? But the minute you stand up and say, I don't agree with this, this is wrong, this is immoral, boy, you could be cut out. I mean, how many people actually, I had some students recently, they were being threatened of losing their jobs because they spoke out. They were in the medical field, and because they spoke out about not being able to reference God at all in med school. They said that once they know you're a Christian, Father, the gloves come off. Like, well, right? So they were making it hard for them to graduate if they were still Christians by the end of med school. So this is something that we are running into to a degree, kind of the mark of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, do trade, enjoy life, but don't tell us that what we're doing is wrong. Yeah, so this is a scary part. It doesn't get better. So let's keep going. And I heard another voice come from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived in luxury, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen and am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. Okay, so that now again, this is that ancient land. It's the Roman Empire, and it's any of us, right? So what does it say? We need to come out of her. Well, this isn't literal, because this is the world. It's actually talking about the powers of the world. So we can't leave the United States and go to some Christian perfect nation. That's not what it's talking about. It's saying we need to not partake of her fornication. We need to not partake of her iniquities. We need to not partake of the sin. Right? Come out of her and be holy. I do not pray for those that they come out of the world, but that you keep them in the world. Right? That he protects us in the world. So we have this this sort of idea. We do not want to share in her sins, or we will share in her punishment. Right? Does that make sense? This is a much better understanding for us if we want to try to understand the idea of heaven and hell. Is what side of the battle are we actually fighting on? If we're on God's side, if we're in God's house, if we're in God's, living God's life, then that life will go on forever. But if we're living a life that's temporary, if we're living for the temporary things of life, if the temporary things of life are what brings us hope and joy and so on, the luxuries, they're going to be ripped out of our hands, if nothing else at death. But they're going to be ripped out of our hands because they're temporary. They have to go. And if we can't let it slide through our hands like sand at the beach, right, then we're going to cling to it. But if we cling to it, it's going to be lit on fire. That means we're going to get lit on fire. It's an easy, nice kind of analogy for understanding heaven and hell, right? If we're not holding anything that can catch fire, we won't catch fire. But if we're only holding things that catch fire, then we will catch fire. right? Or like Pentecost, the flames come on the apostles but do not burn them. But what happens usually when flames hit somebody? They engulf their clothes and then it engulfs the person, right? We're either a burning bush or a bush that's burning. Yes, another image, right? The people stoking the fire are killed by the fire. The people thrown in the fire are nourished with water. Yeah, this symbol's all throughout Scripture. If we are stoking the fires of hell, we will be the one that are burned. It's easy to see with addictions, but then we need to apply it to things we don't think of as addictions. It's easy to see how a person who's struggling with alcoholism or struggling with a drug addiction, that as they stoke the fires of that, they're burning themselves. That's easy to see. But sometimes I don't think we really recognize that we can be oppressors of others through gossip, through lies, right? Through seeking power and authority over other people, right? These can all be ways in which we oppress our neighbor and maybe don't notice. And this is what he's saying. We have to come out of her. We can't be a part of it. If we're part of it, we'll be part of it. And she's going to catch fire. So in its time, the Roman state represented the power of the world that could give luxury to anyone who was willing to give up their morality. If you were willing to partner up with Rome, you could do pretty good for yourself. But you weren't going to be able to tell Rome how to live. Right? And Rome was going to get to tell you how to live. But Revelation plays out in every age of the church. We ourselves live in a time where we can have every possible luxury, but then we're tempted to be unfaithful Christians, unfaithful spouses, unfaithful friends or children or whatever else. Actually, one of the things that strikes me most about our culture, maybe might be unusual to hear, but is how our nation actively encourages and expects children to rebel against their parents. Like it's a rite of passage. Right? That's a pretty good sign something's off. That our culture actively preaches the idea that you're not truly an adult until you've thrown off the bonds of your parents. Watch the Disney movies. Moana literally plays this out. It's amazing. Like the myths of our time, which are Disney movies, the Marvel movies, the myths we tell ourselves, they're all about this idea that you're not truly yourself until you've thrown off the generation before you.
And it seems like a lot of modern psychology is a lot of like, it was your parents' fault.
Yes.
Everything that's wrong with you is like, your parents were bad, don't you hate your dad, mom? Like, that's why you're so bad who you are.
Yeah, and it's so contrary to the church, because when the church calls us, and let's say we did have bad parents, our parents made mistakes, the church holds out the reality that we are able to be the ones in whom that's healed. That the failure of our parents is healed in our healing. Right? So it's the opposite, complete opposite. It's not rebellion. It's being faithful where they weren't faithful. And then maybe they can be saved through us giving our lives. Right? Yes, so this temptation that we're under, this is significant. But dude, this has been with us. I mean, in the American culture, this has been with us since at least like the 1920s. Maybe a slight relaxation during the 50s, I don't know. Right? Definitely since the 1960s.
Even moving out of the house.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, the females got married or they lived with their parents and took care of them.
You're right. So there's always been kind of this understanding, but we're getting to the point where we actually preach and teach that we need to get along with Babylon. This is kind of problematic. Now, each of these things is kind of, we have to determine in our own lives what we can do with it, you know. But we do have to recognize that this idea that we have to overthrow faithfulness is probably not of God. Okay, so let's finish up 18 here. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her, terrified at her torment, and they will stand afar off and cry, Woe, woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon! In 1 hour your doom has come. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore, cargoes of gold, silver, precious stone, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron, marble, cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, of fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, human beings sold as slaves. They will say, the fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your luxury and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth will stand afar off from her, terrified at her torment. And this is such a sad scene. It's pretty clear that we can see that all those things that were named are things that were like in trade, right? They're obviously, this is merchants who trade all these things. So it's talking about luxury, right? But it's also things that would have been tied to like the temple, gold, silver, precious stone, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet. The things that are mentioned are things that are spoken of as part of the temple and the temple worship. Cinnamon and spice, or frankincense, myrrh, wine and oil, right, which are offerings to God. Fine flour and wheat, which are offerings to God. Cattle and sheep, which are offerings of God, right? So there's all these things that Israel had an abundance of that it's now gone. But also likewise for us, right? If that's where we find our joy, that's what our joy is. We're not going to have it. It's just going to be gone. It doesn't last forever. But what's really sad is you have here this thing, and this is what I meant by this is such a sad scene, because the merchants who sold these things, they stand afar off and mourn. They don't mourn for the fall of the city. They mourn they can't get rich. They don't care about Babylon. They don't care about the beast. They don't care about the woman riding the beast. They're just can't get their scarlet and fine linen. This, I mean, like, you almost can't picture hell in a better way. It's like the idea that there's just, that's all you've become. Just a dispensary to give somebody else joy. Passing, vapid, empty joy, but, right? And so they don't even mourn when you fall. It's just, oh, bummer. Where am I going to get my cinnamon now? And I can't think of a worse thing. You know, could you imagine a worse thing than someone, a beloved one of ours dies, and maybe their kid comes to the funeral and they go, now where am I going to get my money? Like, what? That's your thought? Boy, that would really hurt us. But that's what these people are doing. They don't care about Babylon. They don't care about the woman just got eaten. They just can't get their stuff anymore. The other thing to keep in mind here is you probably noticed, this sounds very this worldly. It doesn't sound like the next world. These are merchants, and they're standing afar off. So obviously we're still dealing with our own time. Time is still going on. These merchants are like, oh, man, bummer. The economy got bad. I mean, that's the thing that you would fear, like as our country. You know, if our country fell, would anybody say, oh, it's so sad that this great nation that gave, you know, that they gave the world, you know, freedom and gave the world justice has fallen? Or would they say, oh, bummer, the country that gave us McDonald's, you know? It's that kind of a thing. But it's good to remember that the U.S. government is not eternal. This life in the flesh is certainly temporary. So Revelation is really saying that if our lives are defined by things that are passing away, then it will pass away from us too. If we've made this life heaven, and none of that's going to be there when we get there, then we won't get heaven when we get there. You know? I can't remember what saint said it. My spiritual father used to say it all the time. If you don't like church, you won't like heaven. Because church is just one, or because heaven is just one big long church service. So then the question becomes, what does make me happy? If church isn't the thing that fulfills me and brings my heart with the peace and joy, then what is it that's bringing me peace and joy? Because when that thing's taken away, which it will be in eternal life, because we won't have money, we won't have pancakes, we won't have whatever else it is that's on our mind, then what was supposed to be heaven for us has become hell. But we didn't like heaven during our lifetime, so we wouldn't like it then either. Okay. That was at verse 16, I think. All of this ends up having the same meaning. Woe to you, great city. I'm not reading the same passage. Let me go up and I'll take a look at 16. And saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out that they saw the smoke of her burning, and said, What is like this great city? Okay, so they used to wonder at how awesome the city is. Now they're wondering at the huge fire it's become. They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. All right, she was drunk on their blood. He's now taken away everything that they've longed for, and now they have nothing.
What is the thing that it says that the martyrs are crying under the altar? You know what I'm talking about?
Well, it's some version of "Come, Come, Lord Jesus." It's "How long, O Lord, holy and true."
Is it talking about that though?
Yeah, that their prayers, that the prayers of the martyrs are finally being fulfilled. That this enemy that has killed all of God's martyrs is now getting its just deserts.
Real quick about it.
Mm-hmm.
Ferris told me to tell you that there's a young lady waiting for your signatures out in the cafeteria.
Okay.
Some sort.
Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea. Thus, with violence, the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more, and the voice of a bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and saints, and all who were slain on the earth. There it is. So that's our choice that God's putting in front of us. Right? Come out of her, do not be part of what she's up to, or engage in what she's up to and get the reward that's coming to her. Yeah. God is king. He will not be mocked, right? There will come a time that will be the last time for us personally and for the world. And we will meet God, and there will have to be a reckoning. Right? But he's made very clear to us what he wants us to do, right? And oddly, not that difficult, but it's difficult in the doing of it, right? In the details. Lord have mercy. Let's pray. Like, I got a bunch of stuff to do, don't I? Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Glory to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and unto ages of ages.